Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including changes that are probably coming down the pipe for the Democratic Party, how some changes in Florida may be afoot because of the potential of Marco Rubio being the senator that is chosen for the Secretary of State, and some changes coming when it comes to the position on crypto in the next administration. So lots of changes today. We're going to be discussing all of them. And of course, we will end today with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. But that's enough rambling for me. Let's jump into our daily debate. So, is the Obama coalition, the Obama philosophy, the Obama way of governing, but also running elections, the Obama era within the Democratic Party, is it over? I honestly don't know. I don't necessarily, I've seen speculation from both sides, and I think that some Democrats want to stick to it. They feel as though that part of the way that Obama went about, especially when it came to his ground game and his operation as a whole, were very effective, but maybe his coalition that he had built is definitely not something that can be relied upon anymore. But also you hear talking points from his same side saying we can no longer take the Obama way forward. It's not necessarily the right path for the Democratic Party, and the Republicans are definitely, bragging about this moment, about Trump coming back in as president number 47, saying that the Democrats have failed and they need to leave behind the Obama era. I think that is political opportunism from some Republicans, but hey, we'll jump into all my thoughts on it. I want to know what your thoughts are. What is the best path forward? Do they need a Clinton-like movement? Do they need an FDR-like figure? Do they need someone who is more Obama-esque? What is the path forward for the Democratic Party that makes the most sense and would even be compelling to you, whether you're a person that normally votes Democrat or not, because you're the average person. And if you got opinions, throw them out there, because maybe you'll actually be heard. Maybe this is a time of self-reckoning in the Democratic Party, and probably not so much in the Republican Party. They feel as though their mandate has been vindicated. But maybe they'll take it too far, and maybe you'll be right there waiting to provide your opinion and make sure that when it's needed to be heard the most, it is. But hey, right now, we're going to talk about one person's opinion and one person's opinion specifically, and that is AOC's. Our first article comes from the Washington Examiner. Headline reads, AOC pushes Democratic Party to distance itself from Obama-era insiders. Now, whether you pay attention to politics on the regular or not, there's no doubt that you can acknowledge the transformational presidency that Obama brought to the table when he came into the White House, and he sat down and basically said, I have the mandate of the people to move a little bit more progressive. Now, during his first term, you didn't necessarily see it as much, but you definitely saw it during his second term. He was trying to continue to push some of these more progressive ideals and changes, and also perceptions of the executive branch really far forward. Then again, it was already, especially when it comes to the power of the executive branch, basically, I wouldn't say being unending, but being very broad. That was something that was chipped away at during Bush's presidency as well. It's been chipped away at from all the presidencies. I mean, we've seen exponential increases in executive orders throughout the Bush presidencies, whether it be the power of the military during the Bush presidency specifically, or Obama's willingness and his, I don't want to say eagerness, because that implies that he had a wanton disregard for human life, but his willingness to use drone strikes in foreign nations, and also the fact that he was willing to increase the surveillance state after Mr. Bush had done the exact same thing, and using a lot of these different intelligence agencies and making sure that their power goes unchecked, though it should be supervised by Congress. It is also something that is the president directly benefits from, so therefore they're not necessarily going to call it out as much. We've seen the exact same expansion of executive powers, especially in executive orders throughout the Trump presidency. Even if you agree with the things that he's doing with that executive power, you cannot say that executive power is something that he decreased, even if you agree with the way that he increased it. And Joe Biden, of course, did the exact same thing. I would say that the regulatory agencies had more power underneath the Biden and Obama administrations, but that doesn't limit what the president can do on foreign in a foreign affairs way, which is something that Trump and both Obama and Bush took great advantage of in order to make sure that they got their objectives done across the world. So we've seen a collective increase in the power of the executive, and that is something that Obama most definitely brought to the table for the Democrats. Before that, Bill Clinton, though he did also sign executive orders, and he did try to broaden the scope of what he can do as a president, so to speak, that doesn't mean that it was to anywhere the same degree as Obama. And the perception of a party leader that is totally encompassing, enthralling, definitely, or at least this popularist kind of movement started during Obama's presidency and, more importantly, his run to the White House. And our modern politics is defined by Obama and his stardom. You could say that Donald Trump is a direct response to what the Democrats brought to the table with Obama. Now, is that exactly what AOC is saying? No, she's actually talking more specifically about the members of his team, whether it be your Axelrods, whether it be your Pod Save Bros, who were deeply embedded in the Obama administrations, whether it be the Jen Psaki's, whether it be other people who were on the foreign policy side, all of them, how they are still active within the DNC party, how they are the Democratic National Convention, how they're active in the Democratic Party, and they're still proliferating this sort of worldview that would be more aligned with Obama. And I think she would argue that this needs to go in a more Bernie Sanders direction, though I'm sure she would be amenable to some moderate changes, considering how much she's been willing to jockey back and forth and play ball with the centrists of her party, like Miss Nancy Pelosi. But this is a moment where she can truly seize on the loss and say, hey, we were not progressive enough. We were not listening to the American people enough. We were leaving behind our workers. We were leaving behind this distinct class of people within the center of our United States, these blue wall states, the workers, the union workers, and we did not hear out their issues, and Donald Trump spoke to them more, and now we need to reorient ourselves. I think she has this moment. This is truly a moment for a change in the winds. You can start to stir the pot a little bit. I'm mixing metaphors here, but it's true. She can say, hey, the prevailing winds are not good. Maybe we should change the direction of the party currently. Maybe, just like Obama said, if you change the course of a ship by only a degree, it can result in a major change further down the road. And obviously, if it's a ship, it's not actually the road as you journey further along in the sea. But it's going to take time. And that is why I think this is the perfect moment to say, take a true categorical analysis of where the party has gone wrong and shift the direction of it. It will probably take them at least the 4 years of Donald Trump, if not maybe another 4 years of Republican. But I think they could build back the faith that people used to have in the Democratic Party. I don't know if going through the progressive wing is the way to do it, because a lot of people perceive the progressive wing of the party being too strong, at least on the cultural side. On the legislative side, they haven't necessarily gotten what they've wanted too much, except on maybe cultural issues, and even then it's a little bit thin, honestly, because most of them were whipped into shape by Nancy Pelosi, as we had mentioned before. But I think they could at least make an argument for it. And let's see more specifically what she has to say. Quote, Ocasio-Cortez's comments are in response to a Democratic strategist, David Axelrod, floating Rahm Emanuel as a potential chairman of the Democratic National Committee, as the DNC is seeking a rebranding and a new chairman, since current chairman Jamie Harrison is not expected to seek a second term. Speaking on his podcast, Hacks on Tap, Axelrod said, quote, if they said, well, what should we do? Who should lead the party? I would take Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, and I would bring him back from Japan, and I would appoint him chairman of the Democratic National Committee. So this is Axelrod saying, this is who I'm going to tap. It's ironic that he's on Hacks on Tap, and then he's basically saying, this is who I would tap for the position. And both of these guys operated for a few good years in I believe it was about 2 or so, that they both operated around the same time in the first Obama presidency. So obviously, they have a history. They understand one another. They at least understand each other's philosophy. They may not have necessarily agreed on everything. They may not have been the best of friends. But Emanuel was the chief of staff, and Axelrod was a senior advisor. So you know that they're at least aligned to some degree on their objectives, or they were at least able to synthesize that into a message that Obama could at least respect, because neither of them got fired. At least Emmanuel didn't for about 2 years. And then again, it talks about that he was actually promoted to the ambassador of Japan. He wasn't necessarily fired. In Washington, you never know whether it's actually a true promotion or it's just a way to get somebody out of the current position without having too much fuss. But the point being that these two definitely go back, but as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has highlighted, this is two people who were embedded in the Obama administration who bring the Obama philosophy to the table. And here is her more exact quote. Quote, "This is a, quote, disease of Washington, in Washington, of Democrats who spend more time listening to the donor class than working people. If you want to know the seed of the party's political crisis, that's it," end quote. And this is actually interesting because it's very similar to Bernie Sanders' argument. When he was doing his own analysis of why the party failed, he said that the party no longer thinks in terms of the working man, of the working woman. They no longer support the working classes. Nancy Pelosi obviously came out and she shot back at that. She was not having it. She's like, "Hey, Bernie, okay, I don't know if you're in a real race or you're just running in Vermont essentially, but hey, come to the real world, buddy. We do fight for the working class." And I think she doesn't necessarily have the strongest argument in the world, but hey, you can let her believe whatever she wants to believe. The point being that he and her, and by her I mean Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, and Bernie, both had a very similar message. Now, of course, AOC could be taking Bernie's lead just purely based off of his public statements alone, or they may be having conversations in the back rooms about how they have a progressive realignment moving forward. And I think, honestly, it's a good way to stir up controversy, get a little bit of attention. Say that your party hasn't been serving the working man. We don't go far enough for the working man. That is a message that, even if it's not necessarily true, even if you don't believe it yourself, some people, some working people, will actually believe it. Remember the split ticket AOC Trump voter? Well, what if they are converted into a split ticket AOC Vance voter? Maybe they're trying, AOC and her conglomerate of people are trying to actually prevent that and trying to say, hey, we know that this segment of the population exists. In my district, they were an AOC Trump voter. Maybe in other districts, there'll be a Trump voter, but a more progressive member of the House in the future. Or maybe there'll be a Trump voter or a Vance voter, but vote for someone a little bit more progressive in the Senate. And maybe we can use that leverage in order to actually put someone forward to build a new coalition within the party in order to get someone who is more progressive at the top of the ticket as well. I think that they're looking at this moment as a true failure of the DNC, which I would say they are right to, a true failure of the message of the last few years, whether it be the message that Trump is a absolute fascist, that the billionaire Wall Street class are evil while taking so much of their money, the Democrats in this case, and the Republicans, they both take money from Wall Street, but the Democrats have been saying that the Republicans are the party of the big business, of the big donors, of the billionaires. And don't get me wrong, like I said, both parties take from the billionaires, but it seems a little bit hypocritical when your own party is taking millions upon millions of dollars from the Wall Street executives as well. And it seems as though that you're not necessarily fighting for the average day person, but you're actually fighting for the top dollar donors. And don't get me wrong, Trump could make an argument in 2016, mainly because he did take money from other places, but a lot of it was self-funded. This last time, it was not whatsoever. A lot of it was money coming from big dollar donors, coming from PACs, coming from individual contributions from people during his time being convicted. But he no longer has the immunity from the, hey, I don't need the billionaires' dollars anymore. He needed the billionaires' dollars. He was out there directly talking to the big industry saying, we're going to lower your taxes. And I'm not saying he was doing a quid pro quo because he wants to lower the taxes for everybody, but he's going out there and saying, hey, but this is something I'm going to do. And maybe if you want some of the benefits that come down from that, either way, if you either, don't vote for me or vote for me, it's going to come if I win, but maybe you should give me money to ensure that it does actually come down the pike. So I think that this moment is truly one where the progressives can come out and have a strong argument. I think the new right also has a strong argument, though they You can probably go and read all about Vance and his connections with one of our favorite big Wall Street boys. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, maybe you should go do a little bit of research about who Vance worked for there for a while. And maybe the name will sound familiar, Mr. Peter Thiel. Anybody? But the point being that the new right does not necessarily have to shun the millionaires and billionaires while still claiming to fight for the working class. But the narrative that has been spun over the course of our lifetime is that it is the wealthy versus the middle and lower class. And whether or not that's true, the message that any classic Republican and even some of the new right Republicans or even some of the old-timey liberals may spin is that these two classes don't have to be at odds. It can be a rising tide for all ships. And whether I believe that or not, that does not mean that the narrative that has been spun throughout my entire lifetime, especially after 2008, does not hold some weight in the popular imagination. Even modern Republicans that I know, or conservatives, they are very skeptical of the elite and the powerful and the wealthy. Even if they believe they have the right to have their wealth, that doesn't mean they trust them with said wealth. So I think there is a possible realignment that could even go across party lines with the progressive and the new right, both being populist movements that actually focus on the working man, that could stir and capture the ire and not necessarily hatred, but the distrust of those elite and wealthy. And I think AOC, Bernie Sanders, may be trying to pick up on that. And it will be very, very interesting to see where this realignment within the party goes. So with that said, let's jump to the next change that I was talking about, which is coming from our friends down there in Florida. So for anybody who doesn't know, the news that Marco Rubio was going to be tapped as the Secretary of State, though it is not confirmed yet, that is who Trump wants to appoint. Anybody who knew what was going on was saying, okay, cool, so that's a safe seat to lose, because when the person who is in that office, whether it be a Senate seat or whether it be a House, whenever they get to level up, so to speak, if they get to step up, go into a bigger, better position, great for them. It is left to the governor of the state to appoint it. So a lot of people were saying, hey, this is a safe seat. You know, if it's in Florida, that's great. Guess what? Ron DeSantis, he is going to come in and he is going to appoint someone that is probably not too far along the lines in the political weeds or too far to the right, and he's going to appoint someone that will be not necessarily the same as Rubio, but close enough that we don't necessarily have to worry about anything. Ronnie D came out in favor of Trump, even though he didn't necessarily want to. He was fighting him pretty hard. He came out almost immediately once he saw that the political winds were not in his favor during the primary. So people are probably thinking that he's going to appoint someone that is America first, or at least close within that vein, if not a traditional conservative. But the question is very, very fascinating when you start to understand that, or at least think about it. Ron's moment, Governor DeSantis, sorry, Ron, I don't know him personally, so I'm not going to call him Ron. That's actually very disrespectful. Governor DeSantis, he is a man who is going to be out of the political spotlight by the next time an election comes around. Trump has already chosen his successor, Vance. Vance is going to have plenty of time to get out there and do stuff. Though, then again, if he outshines Trump, then I think that Trump will shut him down. There's no doubt about that. Trump does not like being the second fiddle in his own show. So that doesn't mean Vance is going to be able to do everything and get all the airtime and going to be on all the different news shows and get those 4 years of pure publicity. Probably trying to implement some policy changes. I don't know if he's going to get every single every single advantage that you could get from being a vice president, because you're not the typical vice president. Even if you're a vice president under Trump and it being his second term, realizing that Trump can't run again, Trump still doesn't want to be shown up by Vance. So I don't necessarily think Vance is going to be able to strut around and truly use the vice presidency as a stepping stone. But there's no doubt that he is definitely in line, and his closest opponent would be Ron DeSantis, in my opinion. And his moment has passed. He has tried. He tried for this election. He announced a little bit late. His book release was a little bit oddly timed, but when the next election comes around in 2028, he will be done with his term, his last term as governor of Florida. It will be over by 2026. And how do you stay politically relevant? Because in politics, it's all about the moment. Do you rise to the moment? He was having a hot moment after COVID. He had the ability to stay in the limelight on the national stage after everything he had done in order to make Florida a state that people wanted to come to, maybe a state that had I don't want to blame nobody, but had a negative reputation with half the country and a positive reputation with the other half, even if that was unjustified. So he was a talking point in everybody's household, either good or bad. And sometimes, even if you have bad name recognition in a house, it can still lend to somebody knowing you better than somebody else who might pop up on the other side of the ticket. But I don't see his moment lasting that long. Let's be clear. Politics is about moments, as I've just laid out. So something else could happen. There could be another battle. There could be another moment for him to really step into the limelight. But I don't think that that's coming quite yet. I think that his time has passed. And even if what this article is suggesting, that he actually appoints somebody to just stay there until 2026, when then he could run after his time as governor is over, because there will be a special election at that point, I think that's a little bit far-fetched. I don't think that'll be enough of a jumping off point in order for him to go back and run for the presidency, but the article is offering it as a genuine possibility that that is a calculation going on within his team. So let's jump into the middle of it here. Quote, another leading candidate who has emerged in DeSantis' orbit is his current chief of staff and 2024 presidential campaign manager, James Untermeyer. Florida lawmakers nod to speculation that DeSantis could tap Untermeyer to fill the seat until 2026, when the term-limited governor could then run in the Senate special election as a springboard to potentially run for president again in 2028. So they're saying potentially here. That's a possibility. He chooses someone that's loyal to him, that's been with him by his side, he knows very well, possibly even has some information on in order to leverage, or has an understanding of what his political ambitions looks like, and then could say, hey, actually, let's swap places. I put you in the spotlight in the Senate temporarily. You can actually use this to run for governor, and then I'll swap with you and I'll run for the Senate. That's a possibility, but let's keep going with the quote here. Quote, but DeSantis' own political plans beyond the governor's mansion remain a mystery after his unsuccessful 2024 primary run. And it's far from clear that after serving as the chief executive of Florida, the former congressman would want to return to the House to even briefly serve as a legislative body of 100 lawmakers. The Senate is a step up. Don't get it wrong. Do not get it twisted. I've been saying that a lot recently, but I feel like there's a lot of things that get twisted. The Senate is a step up compared to the House. It is much more prestigious. There is no doubt about that. But once you have been at the executive level, do you really want to go back and be a part of the legislative body? Even if you, in theory, have more power because you're on the federal level, you have to worry more about other people's feelings, emotions. You have to negotiate more with them in order to get your objectives passed, versus being an executive where you feel as though you have the mandate. You're going to have to negotiate and work with other people. There's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, you are passing the agenda. You are the one pushing it. You are the final say. I don't know if a person like Mr. DeSantis, who loves governing, from what I can see, he loves being in the political machination, he loves being an operator for sure. I don't know if that's something that will necessarily satisfy him as much, playing the wheel and deal game versus being someone who can just simply be effective. I don't know. I think that there is a good argument for either, but I don't even think, if he does want to go for it, I don't think it will be his time. I do not think that he will have the platform, even if he goes to be a senator for 2 years. Look at what happened for someone who went to be a senator for 2 years, went into the primary in 2020, aka Kamala Harris, and then she ended up being a VP. So maybe Vance brings him on as VP. There's a little coup d'etat that happens afterwards, and then even if Vance made it the extra, the extra 4 years, Ron's older than him, I don't think he would want to be on that ticket. But also, then you would have to assume that Republicans will be in power for another 8 years, and then Ron would have to be able to get elected after that, which would be another 4, at least another 8. Like, come on. If you're doing the political gamesmanship, Ron's moment was 2024. And I don't necessarily see him having another moment, but if he's going to have another moment, it is 2028 at the latest. And I don't see that one happening. I don't see another springboard. He may have lost all he can. Who knows? He may get a special appointment. That's always possible. He may get tapped for something as his governorship comes to an end. That is also possible, and that can be a springboard moving forward. But right now, I don't see it. It doesn't mean it's not possible. I'm just saying right now, I don't see it. But I thought it was an interesting article because it was framed itself as, hey, we're going to talk about who's going to replace Rubio. But really, it was talking about DeSantis' political wishes going forward, which I thought was a funny little twist. All right, so our final article comes from Salon. The headline reads, "The Crypto Revolution Comes to Washington." And honestly, I will summarize most of what this article says, which is this is the largest amount of pro-crypto Congress people, whether it be House members or senators, to ever be elected in one cycle. This is the most pro-crypto president, the one who said we're going to make crypto a beautiful, beautiful big home. America is going to be the most pro-crypto, blah, 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 blah. However you want to do your Trump accent, maybe you're sitting there doing it yourself. But there's no doubt, no matter how much you want to meme him, that he is the most pro-crypto president. This is a big boon to the crypto space. Whether or not you saw Bitcoin go up to about 93,000, that's what it summarizes. The peak is 93,000 as of the time of recording this, though it very well could be higher. The point is that they are looking at the crypto winter being over. Deregulation is coming. The SEC and the FTC are probably not going to take on hard positions against crypto. Peter Thiel, Andreessen Horowitz, all of these, Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen, who is the one of the managing partners of Andreessen Horowitz, are both coming out and making blockchain and crypto plays. They're both advocating for it. Elon Musk, of course, is a big, big fan. Doge has been doing very well over the course of the last few weeks. So the point being that this is an atmosphere that is priming crypto to explode, and specifically blockchain technology. You can't forget that one, because there's more to crypto than just crypto itself. The article goes through and talks about how some crypto companies are happy about the decentralization. That's why a lot of people got into crypto, the decentralization of currency. And there's one errant line in there that says, actually, it seems like it's the opposite with the amount of concentrated wealth at the top of the system that is pro-crypto advocating for crypto spending, which is fair enough. But what I also find very funny is almost all cryptocurrencies are not actually decentralized. They are centralized, but in private hands. So the blockchain technology itself could be very good at disseminating, whether it be implementing into the internet to make sure that not one company or another has complete and utter control over what goes on the internet, and you can actually have this information shared across different platforms, whether it be a blockchain-like system where you could subscribe to different websites or different news feeds. There's lots of different thinking out there. I would read Life After Google if you're very, very fascinated. That's the only book that I've read that goes into it comprehensively, but there are plenty of other ones that are great as well. But my point being that there's more to crypto, even though it is hyper-concentrated in the hands of people who have wealth and are able to build out these technologies right now. The blockchain technology itself can actually be very, very beneficial moving forward and can be implemented in many, many different ways to ensure that our, I don't want to say ease of life, but our ability to act freely and not necessarily be limited by a single entity, whether it be a government or large corporations, there is potential there. And that's what I'm more excited about than just crypto itself. I like the fact that crypto is going to take off, but I like the fact crypto is going to take off and bring along blockchain technology with it, especially with NVIDIA chips being so powerful and useful nowadays that a lot of people use them for many, many different things, whether it be AI, but also it's very good at processing different algorithms to actually mine Bitcoin and also decrypt blockchains and things like that. So maybe with NVIDIA also taking off, it is a beautiful little synthesis of multiple factors that could lead to a golden age in crypto and blockchain technology. But hey, that's enough rambling. I think we are going to leave you with a little positive story here. We're going to go to the Daily Delight because that article is fascinating, and I honestly don't have enough time to give it the proper justice, but I'm linking it to the description. That last one, I broke it down as well as I could in the amount of time I had, and I think I did a pretty good job, not going to lie. But I still want you to go read that one. That's what this is all about, bringing you that extra little news, bringing that thing that may have slipped your mind or may have gone into a publication you might normally not read. Like Salone probably wouldn't be big crypto in the past. They would be very anti-crypto because a lot of conservative or billionaires, millionaires were really, really interested in crypto technology, and that may have slipped your side. You may not read Salone, but yet they have a relatively, I would say, unbiased take on what a crypto administration would look like, and it actually proposes something that's actually very interesting and fun to consider, at least in my opinion. So, with that said, let's jump into our daily delight. This one comes from Animals Around the Globe. Golden Retriever encounters goats for the first time ever. And yes, it is exactly as adorable as you think it is. This little guy, he's doing his little, bend over, tail up, wagging, try to introduce himself. The goats are kind of confused. And if you want to see a funny little interaction between two different species and see how they first get to know each other, when they're first smelling each other for the initial time, yeah, that's a great article. Go over there, read that one. There's also a video that comes along with it. Like I mentioned, all the other articles from today will also be linked in the description below that like and subscribe button. And also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. And if you want to come back here on Tuesday and Thursday, you'll find 6 and 6, which is 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. That is our international news segment, not so U.S. focused. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.